Alright guys, here is for Wednesday's lecture. Hope everyone is staying safe and staying okay out there and all that jazz, so to speak. But anyway, quick thing before we get on to today's lecture. I posted an announcement the day before, which is the day of recording this. It's not really important. Yesterday, on Tuesday, there was an announcement that went out that would be, I'm reopening the Unit 2 proposal project. The reason why, and I'm just reiterating what was in that announcement, just so everybody sees this, is because I realized when this was due was when we were on, everything was kind of up in the air. Some of you guys might have been leaving for spring break or trying to get back to your families if you are from out of state, when everything was trying to close down. So getting this in might have been a little bit of a logistic nightmare for some people. And realizing that I'm missing the Unit 2 proposal, from a lot of you guys. I wanted to reopen that back up, give everyone another shot if you have it, to get it to me so I can grade it, because this was a significant portion of your grade for Unit 2, and I would hate to have to count that as a 0, especially in light of everything that's going on. There's just a lot of complications these days. So if you have that, but you did not get it in, or, I don't know, say you didn't have it finished, but want to get it in all the same, take advantage of this, not that any of you would do any such sort of thing. This will be open until next Friday, so this should be Friday the 17th? I believe that's what next Friday is. I could be horribly wrong about that. Don't go by me, go by what's on Canvas. On Canvas is going to be right, but I'm pretty sure it's the 17th. But anyway, something to mention about this, because I realized late work and stuff gets a little tricky, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm slowly losing the will to live, or at the very least be productive, being trapped inside all the time. So just hypothetically thinking that some of you may be in the same boat and can be a little difficult to get things done. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't, or should never get them done, or that I'm going to necessarily be incredibly lenient on lateness. You still should turn it in on time. But I'm in a similar boat. I understand what you guys maybe have on your plates right now. Probably not as much so as if some of you guys had to move and travel, or if you're here at the dorms still. I think they're still open. But things are complicated, and I get that. And I want to help you guys finish the semester as well as possible, despite the fact that we got interrupted by a plague. Because it's nobody's fault, and nobody should have to pay for that. Least of all you guys. Alright, but I just wanted to mention that. So if you want to get it into me, you have until next Friday to turn it in / maybe work on it. Maybe, if you haven't done it yet. Who knows? But anyway, that being that, so that technically is the first thing. That was just sort of announcements. But the thing we're going to be talking about today is citations. Specifically, 3 different types: MLA, APA, and Chicago. And the reason why we're going to be focusing on these 3 specifically is because each one of these is probably the ones you're going to be using when you guys are in college the most. If you're ever having to do research or anything, these cover basically all the fields you're going to be looking at. There's other things, like ASA, but we're not going to worry about that because it's similar to APA, but it's not worth going into the nuance for this because you're by and large just going to be using these 3s. These 3, But anyway, so we'll start with MLA. So what are you going to use MLA primarily for? So this is usually for the humanities. And humanities is just everything that includes, if it's the arts, if it's literature, if it's music, I suppose. I don't know why you'd be writing citation papers in music. I'm not a music major. I think some of you are. Correct me if I'm wrong. I hope you don't have to write papers for that. You have enough to do practicing and whatnot. But you get the idea. This is what MLA is typically used for. Now, each of these has a slightly different format than the rest, and there's some great resources on Purdue.com, and I'm sure you guys have heard endless things about that website. I think I've even mentioned it a couple times, but there's a great document on there that I will either put a link to in the description of this video, or put it up on Canvas as well, because what it does is it goes through it and it does a side-by-side comparison for each one of these. So it becomes really easy to see the differences in various different sources. It covers books, it covers podcasts, it covers websites with authors, without authors, with more than 3 authors, with more than 10 authors, YouTube videos, you name it. It shows you how to do all those different sources for each one of these, and it explains it really, really well. So I'll put that up there. That's a great resource, and I'm pulling all of this information from that straight from Purdue. So if you guys are curious, you don't feel like watching this whole video again, there's obviously other resources, but also that website and that forum is going to be the best one that I can give you guys, because I know this is all really complicated. Nobody likes citations, particularly MLA, because MLA, as we get into this new in-text citations here in a second, are utterly obnoxious. But anyway, let's start with just book format. So if you're citing something for a book, the general format, and this generally goes for a lot of things in MLA, so books are a good place to start. But what you want to do is you're going to usually have the name of whoever you're looking at. So you have the last, and then you have a comma, and then you have a first, and then you have a period. You always have a period after that. The period kind of is like the separator between the different elements in the citation. Think of it like slices of bread in a sandwich. It keeps everything together, keeps everything organized. Citations probably wouldn't be a very tasty sandwich, but you get the idea. And then you have the title, which is always going to be in italics. If it's a book, it's not great italics, but you get the idea. The other thing is, I think you guys know this already, but some things are italics, some things are in quotation marks. If you're ever confused about what those are, just remember if it's really long, it's going to be in italics. So long equals italics. So remember, Italians are very long-winded. They're very passionate and lengthy people. I don't know if you've ever described somebody as lengthy, but apparently Italians are. So that's a way to remember that. If it's something long, it's going to be in italics. If it's short, then it's going to be in quotes. Because when it's short, like sarcasm is short, or you put things in like scare quotes. So if something was, like if you say it was scary, then you're actually saying it was scary, but it was scary, then it's usually really short. So remember, Italians are long and short things are in quotes. Hopefully that helps. But anyway, for the sake of this example, we're just putting it in italics because you're usually citing a book or something, or at least for this example. So you have the entire title in italics here, and then you will just have the name of the publisher. So think for like if it's a Penguin Classics book or it's like Scholastic or something like I don't know why I'm using those as examples, but they're well-known publishers. And then you have the year. I don't know what year we want to have. Let's just no, we can do better. Let's just like 1984. That was a great year. If you got that joke, extra credit. Before this, so this is basically MLA. You got your last, your first, the title of whatever it is, either in italics or quotes, the name of the publisher. You don't need anything more than that. And then the comma, and then the year, and then a period right at the very end. That's MLA. Now, really quickly, let's go ahead and take a look at what the in-text citation is, just to keep everything on the same place, because in-text citation for MLA can be a bit confusing, because one of the things that's people will, if you take more English courses that professors will absolutely stick you on, is say you have a long-running quote, you just quoted somebody or something that's really important, you need to put a page number or something like that at the end of it. Now, the temptation would be to put the period on the inside of the quotation marks and then put the page number out here. That is not correct. So the thing that you want to do when you're at MLA is you always want the period to go outside of absolutely everything. The period is the very, very last thing in any given quote. Always is, no matter what it is. So if you had your quote here again, you would not, I repeat, you would not put the period here. Nothing goes at the end of this. I know that feels weird, but don't put a period there. Don't put anything there. Now, if you're, we'll go on to some other things if this quote is in another context, but if this is at the end of a sentence, then just put the page number here in brackets, and then you put the period at the end. All right, hopefully that's simple and straightforward enough for everybody. Now, the only difference that comes with this is, say, this is in the middle of like a compound sentence. So you had your quote, you have your page number, and then you have and you went on to say something else. Now, if that's the case, then you would put the comma still after the page number here. This is kind of an odd thing. I would recommend not doing this. You usually have the page number at the very end of the sentence, or at the very end of the sentence or paragraph, whatever it is you're quoting from. You would only do this if at the end of this sentence you had another in-text citation, in which case you would add the period at the end of that. Hopefully that's clear. You always have the punctuation, on the outside of the parentheses. Every time with MLA. You always have the punctuation on the outside. One quick caveat to that is for the page number right here, you just need a number. Don't put PG, don't put P dot, don't put P and P. None of that is correct. Just put the number for MLA. You do not need anything else within those brackets when you're doing that. Now, an important thing to note for this is if you're just using the page number, I think I should have mentioned this beforehand as the very first thing, but whenever we're gonna include this up here just for more space. And this goes for any citation style, so this isn't just for MLA, it goes for everything, is that you almost always want to have the author's name in the source, or in the paragraph. So if, John Smith wrote this, then your citation would either have to look, that's terrible. It would either have to look like this, Smith, and there is no comma or anything in between that name and the page number. So it's just Smith, page 73, period, and that would be the end. Or you can say in the paragraph, just say outright, Smith says blah, 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 and at the end, then you just have page 73. So as long as you have the name in there, either in the in-text citation, or you've mentioned it outright in the normal paragraph, you just used the author's name when you're talking about the source, then it's fine. But a good rule of thumb, the author's name, or the closest that you can find to that, for some online articles there might not be an author's name, but the author's name always has to appear within the context of the citation, either in the paragraph or sentence leading up to the in-text citation, or it has to appear in the in-text citation itself. So let me say that again. That whenever you're using an in-text citation, the author's name, or the equivalent thereof for whatever you happen to be citing, has to appear either in the brackets if you don't say it in the sentence or paragraph outright. So hopefully that makes sense. There's great examples on that printout from Purdue, which again, I'll have the link for. If you need help or anything like that, especially it compares all three of them, but all three of them do this. You have to include the author's name or the equivalent information for your source within the context or around the context of your citation. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, I'm happy to answer questions and stuff, but I realize a lot of this can get really technical and finicky and detail-oriented, which is why we're taking an entire class to break this down, to go over some stuff. All right, but that's the gist of MLA, is your first, a period, then the title, either in italics or in quotes, the name of the publisher, that's all you need, it's the name of the publisher, comma, and then the year it was published. And for a book, that's it. Now for the specifics of other sources, and if you don't have an author and other things, all that's on the Purdue handout. And if you guys have questions about that, or if you'd like me to do like another lecture along this line, then I'm happy to do it, talking about individual things, because I know it can get tricky. All right, but let's move on to APA. All right, APA. Everyone's least favorite citation format. And why is that? Well, because It just is. I don't know. APA always gets complicated and seems needlessly difficult. But here we go. All right, so APA, for what you have is you still have all the rules about, what's in quotes and what's in italics. That's just kind of a universal thing. But the difference is that its starting point is a little bit different. Now, APA is predominantly used for, so MLA was in for humanities. APA is usually used for social sciences. So if any of you guys go into, anthropology, if you go into like child care services or things along those lines, and you have to write papers or do research, all of that stuff is going to be in APA. It's one of the more commonly used for people, especially at the university here, because the social sciences just has they have more classes and they're just a bigger part of the school. So you'll probably end up using this more than you think, so it's worth going over in particular detail. So going for just a book citation, what does this look like? There are some notable differences between it and MLA, so it's worth pausing. So beginning it is for APA, you'll have the last name first, just like you normally would. You have a comma, but instead of putting the full name of your source, or the full first name, of your source, you just have the first letter. So we'll just put F for the first name. You have the last, and you just have the initial, and then you have a period. And that's it for the first part. And then you also have the year at the beginning. So that's one of the biggest differences between APA and MLA and Chicago. Is APA, the year must go right after the name. So in this instance, our thing is 1984, and then you have another period. And I'm sorry if it seems like I'm going really slow and being detail-oriented, but in my experience at this university, particularly if you're using this and you're off, you can sometimes get points taken away. So I want you guys to be aware of all the places and commas and periods and where all those stuff is supposed to go, because it can get really tricky and really difficult, and it can lose you points. It's just a big mess, and the less complicated we can make that, the better. All right, but then you move on to the title. Now, there's an interesting thing, at least from what I was able to check on Purdue, and I had to make sure of this, because this is weird, is whenever so say we have the title. Well, in MLA, you would capitalize the title, right? That's one of the general rules. Not in APA. You would then put it in lowercase. I don't know why. That's just the way they do things. But that's how you would want to do it. You have the title in lowercase lettering, except actually, my bad. I'm just checking here. The first letter would be capitalized, but everything else is undercase, lowercase. Lowercase, that's the actual word for it. I don't know why that is. That's just the way it is. All right, but then you have a period at the end. And then for the publishing group, you need to provide the city and state as well as the name of it. So you would have the city, and then you would have a comma, and then you would have, I'm just gonna put capital ST because you usually just abbreviate it for the state. Then you have a colon, and then you have the name of the publisher, and then another period. So this is what APA looks like. It's very different than what MLA is supposed to be, because you have the initial here. You have the date up front. It's not at the end like MLA. For APA, the date is not the date, but the year is up here. The title, except for the first letter, is going to be lowercase. Kind of weird. Don't know why, but that's what you need to do. Then you have a lot of information for the publisher. You have the city, comma, the state, colon, and then their actual name. Again, this is for a book, but almost all the formats for APA follow the same sort of structure. So if you know this, you're off to a really good start. All right, I'm trying to think if there's anything else for this for APA, because we're covering a lot of information, and I'm trying to keep it as short as possible. We're already going pretty long right now. All right, so this is basically what we're doing for Chicago. No, not Chicago. We're doing for APA. Oh, that's right. Let's in-text citations. That's right, because that's the other big thing. Now, for in-text citations, it gets a little more particular than for what you need to do. So for in-text, so this is the end citation here. Now the in-text is going to look at something. It look at something like it is. I know I to that. Maybe it's just because it's those long Italians. That's what all this is about. But anyway, so there's always that rule where if you have, the name of the author in the actual text that you're writing, then you don't need to put it in the brackets at the end. So if it's like this, then you would close it. You would have the parentheses. But for APA, you do actually need the letter P and a period for the page number. All right, everybody with me on that? For APA, you do need to include the letter P, a period, and then whatever number that the page is from. But just like MLA, the period still always goes outside of the parentheses. It'll always do that. But for this, you are going to have the P, the period, and then the page number, if you've mentioned the source by name in the paragraph you're including it in. All right, so that's that one. So what's the other one? So if you haven't mentioned the name of the source, that's going to end up in these brackets. Not too terrible of a surprise, right? But there's some other information here that is not an MLA typically. And what that's going to be is you're going to have, so say that you've talked about your source for a little bit. You've quoted or done, paraphrased, whatever you wanted to do. So you'll have the name, and then you will have a comma, and then you will have the year as well. So even though that wasn't up here if you included the source's name, you will include the year of the source if you don't mention them. That's really important. But then after you have the year, you're going to go just like the end of it. So you have a P, period, and then the page number, and then the period on the outside. So this is with the name. If it's this is without the name if you've mentioned the name of the source in the paragraph that the citation is being used for. If you haven't mentioned the source by name, then that name, along with the year number, needs to go into the brackets at the end. Okay, it's a lot of different stuff. There's a lot of moving parts and things going on here. Don't worry about it. If you want to do APA, we're going to be doing some stuff in Unit 4, where we're going to be using different citations. If you want, that's going to be an option. We'll talk about that more as we get closer to it. So you're welcome to do this if and when we get to that point. I don't know why you would, because I personally don't like APA. MLA is a little more streamlined. APA has a lot of extra things to remember. There's like who wants to go across all of this when you're reading a paper? Nobody does. Nobody likes doing that. So if you want to do APA, you can. I wouldn't understand you if you did. But enough about that. So APA is kind of the weird middle child of the citation family. But let's go to the next one, which is Chicago. Now, Chicago, I wish everybody used Chicago style. Chicago is super easy, really helpful, more intuitive, and it's just really nice to use, especially if you have a lot of quotations, or not a lot of quotations, if you have a lot of sources. This makes things so much easier. Because one of the things, well, let's just say it this way. Let's start out with what you use Chicago for. It's primarily in published books. So if you come across textbooks and things, this is what they probably use. And you'll be able to recognize that that's what they're using, because this is the citation style that uses the oh so wonderful footnotes and endnotes. Now, if you don't know what footnotes and endnotes are, we'll just sum it up and make it really easy. So kind of going out of order, but skipping to the end text citations. So say you have Smith, and Smith wrote some stuff, and you want to talk about whatever Smith wrote, whether you made a quote or a paragraph, or you made a quote or a paraphrase, then all you need to do is provide a handy little footnote at the top. So if you're ever reading a book and you see something like a little 1 or like a 9 or something that's hovering just above the text up in a little corner after the end of the sentence, that's what they're using. They're using Chicago style. That's all you need to do for the in-text citation. You don't need to worry about any of the stuff for page numbers or other things, putting that in the text. You do still have to be careful about that, but not nearly as much as you did before with APA and MLA. You just have to put a number in the text. Super easy. There's a function in Word that'll actually create those endnotes for you, and those just get put at the bottom of the page. So you don't have to worry about formatting something at the end of the page. Now, sometimes for Chicago, a professor may want you to have endnotes, which is like a works cited page, but for Chicago in style. But for my experience, if you're using endnotes where you're putting the citations and things on the same page on which you're actually using them. So the in-text citation, so I'll put it this way. Let's draw a page here because it can get kind of complicated. So say you've written some things, blah, 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 and then you add your footnote at the end of one of the sentences here. At the bottom, then you would have your citation with set off by whatever number that footnote is. And so this right here, this citation at the bottom, this footnote, takes the place of the works cited at the end of your document. You don't need a works cited page with this. If your professor wants one, then that's a different story. This does have rules for if you do have a citation page at the end of the paper. Usually you don't. You just have the endnotes, you just have the footnotes at the bottom of the same page as whatever the citation you just used was. So it makes looking between them a lot easier, and it's a lot easier for you guys because you can just push a button and it creates that and puts this down here, and that's all you got to do for it. Now, down here is the citation, which looks a little bit different. So what does this actually look like? So you have the different numbers. So say it's going to look something like this. So you'll have the 2. So we'll just use the number 2. So this corresponds to whatever number it was that was the footnote that you're making, and it'll follow this. So instead of having the last and then first name, Chicago has the first, middle, actually, my bad, that's not correct. So for this, let's go down here. You will have the first, then you'll have the middle. There is no comma in between them. That was my mistake. And then you will have a period after the initial, and then you'll have the last, and that will be set off by a comma. And then when you have that, then you will have the title of whatever you're working with, and then without any, there's no comma, there's no period or anything after that. The next thing you're going to do is in parentheses, you're going to go back and it's kind of going to steal from APA a little bit, because it's going to have the city of the publisher, and then it's just going to have the name of the publisher here. There, you do not need to have the state or anything else here. It's just the city, colon, and then the name of the publisher. And then after the publisher, you have a comma. And then you have the year, 1984. And then, so we're not quite done yet. And then you close it out with the other parentheses. You have another comma. And then you have the page number. And then you have a period. So this right here is what is going to go at the bottom on your footnotes if you use Chicago style. Now, there's a really important thing to know about this, and I know this video is getting kind of long, but this is worth iterating on, because if you use this, which I would encourage you to do at every opportunity, because this is way easier than any other style, is say you're using the same source over and over and over again, but it's from maybe like slightly different pages. So maybe like one is on 73, another one is on it's on 24, another one is on 68, another one is like 1,800. That's not 1,800, but it's 1,018. I can't math right now. 1,182, something like that. And you're using the same source, there's just all a bunch of different page numbers, and you don't want to go through and write all of this every single dang time. It's a really handy rule for that. So this is what we're gonna do, and then we're gonna end the video because this is really important to know. So what you want to do is, if you're referencing the same source multiple times, but different entries in that source, so in this case, different page numbers, then you can shorten this format the second and third time. So the first time, you're gonna have this up here, you're gonna have it in full, so you're gonna put out the whole citation, the first, middle, last, the title, blah, the publisher, the year, and the page number, and all of that jazz. The first time you use that, that's what you gotta do. But the second time, so that's first. But the second time, you can shorten this a little bit. So you can get away with, maybe you just want to have the last name of your author, and then you have comma, and then you can have the title, and then you have another comma, and then you can just have the page number. I hope that's readable, because I can't write any bigger because I'm running out of space. But that's what you're going to do. For the second time, you can shorten this. So long as they know what you're talking about the same source still. You can just abbreviate this citation the second time you use it. So you can just have the last, the title, and the page number. That's what I would recommend. But it gets even better. For the third time, you don't even need any of that. All you need to do is to have the letters I, B, I, D, period, and then the page number. And this is for any time after you use it the third time. So the first time, you need to put the whole citation down in the footnote. Second time, all you need to do is write the last name, the title, and then the page number, again, down in the footnote. And for the third time and forever after, if you make reference to the same source consecutively, all you need to do is put IBID, period, page number, and then actually there should be a period at the end of that. Oops. But that's all you need to do for the third or fourth, 6 millionth time that you're going to quote this citation in sequence. Now, so I know we're getting kind of long, but I'll keep this short. For Chicago style, I know there's a lot of rules and a lot of things going on here, but this will make your life easier if you use this. If you're using this source, so say you've been quoting this one book for the last 30 different, references, last 30 footnotes, but then you've switched to another source that was important and you have to switch back. You can't use this one if you've gone to another source and then come back to this. You would have to go back to this citation style right here. So you can give the last, the title, and the page number. The reason why I would think it's kind of obvious is because if you're using this and you've begun talking about another source and mean to come back to one that you've been talking about before, and you use this makes it sound like you're talking about that second source rather than the first one. If you guys are following me on that. So if you switch sources, you have to use this the first time when you start talking about that source again. And then after that, you can go back to IBID. But that's a really important thing because if you just use this, if you've switched sources, then it gets confusing about which source you're talking about. But anyway, that's it for today. This has already gone pretty long. Try to keep it short, but there's a lot of useful information here, especially as we're dealing with a lot of research in the coming assignments. But again, if you guys have any questions or things you want to ask me, always send them an email, always post it on announcements. You guys can comment on announcements if you feel comfortable putting questions out there. I don't know. But again, I'll keep it short. That's it for today. I'll talk to you guys on Friday.